From the headquarters of Venezuela English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. French authorities have confirmed that Notre Dame's two iconic front towers are safe after a huge fire broke out in the historic cathedral. The fire is cooling down, however, 2/3 of the roof was destroyed, including its delicate spire, which had collapsed earlier in the evening. Around 400 firefighters are currently trying to contain the blaze that reportedly started around 6 p.m. local time. The cause of the fire has not yet been clarified, but police launched an investigation. President Emmanuel Macron and his wife visited the site and talked with firefighters. He addressed the devastated crowd and ensured the Notre Dame will be rebuilt.
So I say this very solemnly to you tonight. We will rebuild this cathedral altogether, and it is undoubtedly part of the French destiny and the project we will have for the coming years. But I am committed to it. Starting tomorrow, a national subscription will be launched, and well beyond our borders, we will appeal to the greatest talents, and there are many who will come to contribute and rebuild us. We will rebuild Notre Dame, because that's what the French expect, and because it is what our history deserves, and because it's our deep destiny. Thank you.
And thousands watched in horror from nearby bridges and riverbanks how the fire destroyed the 850-year-old Parisian landmark.
Around 6 p.m., we smelled flames. We were in the middle of serving people. I went outside, and we were all shocked. It just went up in flames in the time that the firefighters took to get here, which is normal. They closed off the area. A security zone was created. It was enormous, and what's more, there was a lot of wind. The wind and the fire were changing direction all the time. Then we saw the roof collapse. We also saw it on the news. We are shocked. It's 850 years of history. It really hurts. We're sad.
Representatives of the so-called Lima group met on Monday in Santiago, Chile. They reportedly followed up on the topics discussed in their last meeting held in Bogotá, with particular emphasis on the situation in Venezuela, as the prospect of U.S. military intervention in the region continues to weigh heavily on the bloc. And before this meeting, the government of Canada announced new economic sanctions against the Venezuelan government. According to a statement by the Canadian Foreign Minister, 43 people they consider to be close to President Maduro have been sanctioned. The statement did not provide the names of those sanctioned, but mentioned they were high-ranking officials and regional governors. Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland took part in the Lima Group's meeting in Chile. Our correspondent in Santiago, Theodora Valenzuela, has more on the meeting.
The latest meeting of the Lima Group took place in this hotel in Santiago. 13 representatives plus an envoy sent by the self-proclaimed interim president of Venezuela, Juan Guaidó, took part in the meeting. Early in the morning, they arrived to the presidential palace to meet the Chilean president, Sebastián Piñera. This latest meeting was called for with more urgency than before, since in previous meetings the group has been unable to reach any agreement about the situation in Venezuela. This meeting also takes place soon after the US Secretary Mike Pompeo toured a number of Latin American countries, including Chile. During his visit, Pompeo met with the President Piñera, the Foreign Minister, and a group of Chilean business people. Social movements have strongly rejected Pompeo's visit, saying that the U.S. may be the one who called for this Lima Group meeting.
We thank Diare for that report. Venezuelan citizens gathered at the Simón Bolívar Bridge on Sunday to protest against the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to the Colombian border. Pompeo visited the border city of Cúcuta, where he met with Colombian President Iván Duque and once again took aim at the Venezuelan government. Citizens say Pompeo's presence is part of U.S. interventionism in Venezuela. Among those gathered at the bridge was Freddy Bernal, the commander of the Bolivarian militias in the state of Táchira. He called on citizens to continue defending their country's independence and sovereignty.
Regardless of anything else, Colombia is a US colony, and as such, the US can do whatever they want there. But here, once you cross the border, it's a different story. This is the land of Simón Bolívar, of Zamora, Chavez, and Nicolas. This is the land of people who demand respect. Therefore, in this land, the US does not rule. In this land, we are sovereign and independent.
China has responded to remarks made by Pompeo during his visit to Latin America, calling them blatant lies. The spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, Lu Kang, said his government objects to the U.S. constantly slandering China-Latin American relations.
We have noticed some false accusations made by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo against China on the Venezuelan issue. I would like to say that China's position on Venezuela is clear, as well as consistent. We are safeguarding the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter, as well as regional peace and stability. It should be pointed out that for some time, some US politicians have been carrying the same script of slandering China all over the world, fanning the flames and sowing discord everywhere. Their words and deeds are despicable, but lies are lies. Even if you say it 1,000 times, they are still lies. Mr. Pompeo, you can stop.
Earlier, we spoke to Miguel Figueroa. He's the former leader of the Communist Party of Canada, who is currently in Venezuela on a peace delegation. He spoke about the Venezuela's people's resilience in the face of U.S. aggression.
It's quite clear to us that the maneuver to bring about a very quick regime change or coup d'etat by the United States and its allies has been an abject failure. It has backfired, and in fact there's more support now for the government of President Nicolas Maduro than there probably was even previously. People are indignant about how transparent this maneuver is, how much of a puppet Juan Guaido is of U.S. imperialism, and they're angry about it. The reality is, however, that these sanctions always permeate throughout the economy and impose difficulties on the entire population. So we're against all of these sanctions. It is in fact a form of economic war, and it is illegal under the UN Charter, under the OAS Charter, and under the principles of international law.
Last Wednesday, a group of senior diplomats and former military commanders from the US and Colombia met privately with Venezuelan opposition representatives to discuss the possibilities of a military intervention in Venezuela. In fact, the title of the roundtable hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies was just that, assessing the use of military force in Venezuela. The secret meeting was revealed by the journalist Max Blumenthal of the Grayzone, and he joins us now live to tell us more about it. Thank you, Max, for your time.
Great to be with you.
Max, can you tell us who exactly called this meeting and who was there and what do they represent?
I learned about this meeting on April 10th, which is when it apparently took place. I obtained a check-in list from a source and confirmed the meeting with one participant who was a CSIS staffer and another participant. And both were extremely nervous when I called. They had intended for this to be kept out of the view of the media. And in the meeting was essentially a grotesque gallery of coup advisors, a who's who of the personnel making the sausage of Trump's Venezuela policy. That's everyone from former National Security Council officials to current National Intelligence Council officials to a State Department official to the former head of U.S. Southcom, Admiral Kurt Tidd, and General Juan Pablo Amayo, who is a Colombian general working out of the Colombian embassy, as well as Juan Guaido's gang in Washington, headed up by Carlos Vecchio, and David Smolansky, who is now working under Luis Almagro at the OAS, overseeing Venezuelan migrant policy. So basically a who's who of people behind the coup were involved in this meeting, which was intended to be kept secret.
Some senior U.S. officials, like Elliot Abrams, had seemed to play down the possibilities of a military intervention. Does this meeting suggest a shift in policy?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to learn about what took place in the meeting. I assume there were some participants who warned against the effects of an invasion. In fact, a figure from the Inter-American Dialogue, a think tank in Washington, which has sent one of its fellows to Congress to testify that an invasion or assault on Venezuela would result in massive casualties and the destabilization of the entire region, did participate. However, this meeting was held for a reason, that the Trump administration and those who are shaping its policy on Venezuela are still seriously considering military options. And you can safely assume that the Trump administration is growing desperate after having failed to dislodge Maduro, as Juan Guaido assured them they would do, after the Venezuelan military has demonstrated total loyalty to the Constitution, after Guaido on his so-called Operation Freedom Tour is failing to mobilize the crowds that the U.S. had hoped he would, after sanctions and a blackout have failed to destabilize Venezuela's government. The only thing left is some kind of intervention. And I noticed the participation of officials from the U.S. Agency for International Development in this, and it led me to believe that if there is a military option being explored, it will be conducted under humanitarian guise.
Max, last question for you. Can we surmise anything from the character of the participants of the meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the participants were figures who have taken an extremely militaristic line and have helped push the Trump administration towards its open regime change policy. And some of them are directly involved in the coup. David Smolansky and Carlos Vecchio are figures who are seeking to basically ride into power on the back of U.S. tanks. What's interesting, however, is the participation of active Colombian military personnel like General Amayo and the Brazilian ambassador as well. There won't be a U.S. military invasion without the participation of Colombia and Brazil. And President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil has explicitly ruled out, at least in public, an invasion, and his military appears to be dead set against it. Colombia also seems to fear exacerbating the migrant crisis. So there are a lot of obstacles for the U.S. doing this, but it's important to note that it is still being discussed in a very serious manner. And this was a high-level meeting that was intended to be conducted in secret, away from the press and away from the public eye, so the public can't debate this.
Max, we thank you so much for your time for Telesur English.
Thanks for having me.
We have been speaking with Max Blumenthal. He's a journalist at the Grayzone about the situation in Venezuela. Let's take a short break now.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Grayzone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Social organizations in Chile have protested outside the Ecuadorian embassy in the capital to reject the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's arrest last week. The demonstrators described the detention as an attack on freedom of expression by the Ecuadorian and the British government. Assange was arrested after his asylum status was revoked by Ecuador's President Lenín Moreno. He was living in the embassy since 2012.
We believe this arrest is putting Assange's life in danger. Ecuador didn't want him to continue living in the embassy in London with an asylum status, and the reason they gave was that he didn't behave well. But we all know that his arrest has to do with all the information WikiLeaks has released regarding all the illegal activities carried by the CIA and the government of the United States.
A 7-month-old baby was killed in the department of La Guajira in Colombia after an attack against his father, a former FARC member. Our correspondent Jose Manuel Jimenez has more.
A 7-month-old baby died on his way to the hospital following an attack near the Simón Trinidad Vereda Tierra Grata territory. This is an area where former FARC members live and are prepared to be reintegrated back into society. The toddler was the son of former FARC combatant Carlos Enrique González, who was also seriously injured and remains hospitalized. His wife was also hurt in the attack. The head of the National Agency of Reincorporation denounced the ambush, which led to the child's death. He said the events are being investigated by the prosecutor's office, adding that there needs to be patience and steps to implement peace are carried out. The FARC group has also rejected the assault. In recent times, roughly 100 former FARC members and their families have been killed, and the government has failed to guarantee their protection. At least 50 social movement leaders have also been killed across the country for the year to date. Human rights organizations have said that in spite of the peace agreement, which was signed in 2016, at least 500 indigenous leaders have been murdered. In light of this, 3,000 social leaders from around Colombia will gather in Bogota from April 18th to May 3rd to call on the government to guarantee their safety and implement peace treaties.
135 Colombian women have been violently killed in January and February 2019, according to the Colombian National Legal Medicine Institute. The institute also said that 56% of those cases were perpetrated with firearms. However, the public prosecutor has only reported 48 femicides in the first 3 months of the year. Both authorities agree most of the cases were reported in the department of Valle del Cauca and Antioquia. The latest UN report about women's rights in the country said Colombia created a solid law frame to protect women, but there is still a way to go to correctly apply them. Roughly 2,000 Central American migrants began making their way towards the U.S. border from southern Mexico on Monday. The caravan, which mainly includes women and children, left the state of Chiapas, walking next to the Tapachula-Huehuetan highway. Several migrant caravans have tried to reach the U.S. since October 2018, despite threats by U.S. President Donald Trump.
We don't have another option but to migrate. We don't have another option. And if Trump is not happy, well then, but we don't have another option but to do that, because in our countries we don't have any support. We see that on this side. It's better so everyone heads this way. We think that Trump's heart will have to soften, because we have needs in our countries. For our families, we don't come here because we felt like it one day. We come because we have needs. We left family.
A judge in Argentina has reportedly ordered the seizure of the historical archive of the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo. Dozens of supporters gathered at the organization's main office in Buenos Aires to protest against the order to make an inventory of the group's financial assets. Protesters claimed police are there to seize the human rights organization's historical archives. This organization seeks to locate the missing children of mothers detained during the country's military dictatorship. A Trinidadian national has been shortlisted to win the world's richest poetry prize. Dion Brand has been nominated for The Blue Clerk, an original work about the art of writing. The former poet laureate is up against 6 other nominees for the $75,000 Graphing Poetry jackpot. Brand has previously won the Governor General's Award and the 2011 Griffin Poetry Prize.
Stopping for a paper and a coffee. Some say that poets should stay on matters of nature, on matters of love, on the domestic, on language, the esoteric, not history, not politics. I've often been asked what literature has to do with justice, with freedom, with liberation. This is the conservative line of poetry. To stay away from politics, stay away from intervening in the everyday, except to soothe, to bring good tidings, observe beauty.
The promenade in Cuba's capital, Havana, has been transformed into an art gallery. The project, called Behind the Wall, showcased exhibitions from more than 60 artists. This is part of the 13th Biennial Arts event, which saw 500 Cuban and 300 international participants. More showrooms were displayed in different regions across the island, with the goal of highlighting issues related to migration, human relationships, and shared space.
Behind the Wall is a project undertaken by friends in all the editions. My friends are the ones who support me, the institutions and everything. This is a great project where everyone comes together.
I understand that a city is not a city without people. So for me, people are bigger than cities.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. An Israeli court has ordered the demolition of dozens of Palestinian homes, claiming they were built on what the court called a peace forest. Palestinian residents had approached the court to challenge the demolition. However, they say the court threw out their application and authorized the planned demolition. Israeli authorities frequently demolish Palestinian homes, leaving families in the cold. Egypt's parliament is set to vote on proposed amendments to the country's constitution this Tuesday. The amendment will allow the current president Sisi to extend his time in office. Opponents to the Egyptian regime say they will allow the current incumbent to cement his grip on power, and the government has intensified its crackdown on opposition to the changes. If a two-thirds parliamentary majority approves the amendments, they will be put to the people through a referendum. The African Union has threatened to suspend Sudan following last week's coup that saw former President Omar al-Bashir ousted by the military. The Police and Security Council has given the military 15 days to hand power over to civilians. If not, Sudan will not be allowed to participate in any AU activities until the restoration of the constitutional order. More than 800 people have died due to the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as the World Health Organization decided not to declare it a global health emergency. The WHO said the Ebola outbreak, which has been ongoing since August, has not spread beyond the DRC, and therefore there is no benefit to declaring it an emergency. The statement made on Friday marks the second time the WHO has decided against declaring Ebola in the DRC an emergency. Our correspondent Oscar Pildi brings us the latest details about the outbreak.
Sadly, the Ebola epidemic has worsened over the last few days. Health officials in the DRC confirmed 40 new cases recently. Today's report is not available yet, but it is evident that the epidemic is spreading faster. There is a growing amount of so-called community deaths, where people with Ebola avoid going to health centers to get treated because they are afraid. they will be quarantined. By doing this, they remain in their communities, spreading the disease, and finally dying there. And distrust in the Ebola treatment centers. Last Friday, the Emergency Committee of the World Health Organization held a meeting with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo about the situation. However, they decided not to designate this outbreak as an emergency of international importance, and therefore, the borders of the DRC will not be closed. However, the committee did urge neighboring countries to increase their readiness to face the outbreak. Until now, no cases have spread outside of the territories of Beni and Butembo, inside the DRC. Therefore, health authorities hope they will be able to contain the epidemic soon. But some factors reportedly hinder their efforts, such as armed groups working in the region and a lack of communication between communities. One of the main fears is that the virus will spread to the city of Goma or neighboring countries like Rwanda. This would mean the epidemic would become an international emergency and it would be much harder to control.
We thank Oscar for that report. In a historic win for Russia's LGBTQ community, a court has ruled in favor of a transgender woman who claims she was fired because of her gender identity. Russian transgender woman Anastasia Vasilyeva was awarded almost $28,000 in damages and losses after she was fired from a printing press in 2017. She worked for the company as a male for 12 years and was fired after she showed her employers her corrected passport listing her gender as female.
I didn't hope to win because I understand where I live. I understand my chances, and of course, they were not very good. Theoretically, hypothetically, I had the chance, but I did not expect to win the case.
Several German museums have returned ancestral Aboriginal remains to the Australian Yawuru and Yidinhi communities. Skulls and bones were taken from Aboriginal people by scientists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries and brought to museums, universities, and private collections in Germany and around the world. They were often subjected to controversial research about human biological variety. Germany plans to return a total of 53 remains to Aboriginal communities in April. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.